Hi, I'm Greg Sizemore, the president and founder of the Construction Users Roundtable, commonly called CURT. CURT is an organization that focuses primarily, but not exclusively, on the owner's needs in the industrial construction space. What we do is share perspectives, resources, and experiences one with the other, along with our industry trade partners, contractors, subcontractors, service providers, etc. The whole purpose is truly to help you become a more well-informed decision maker. If you want to know more about CURT, our website is very simple, CURT.org. That's CURT.org. And in there is a plethora of email addresses or phone numbers that you can call and get more information. Right now, this podcast is called Construction Connections, of course, powered by CURT. And we are so delighted to have a longtime friend of our organization, former speaker at our conference, Mr. Clay Gilge. Clay, thank you for taking time to be with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Let me tell you a little bit about Clay. Clay is the national lead and principal for KPMG's Capital Projects Group in the United States. And he leads their major project advisory practice, has 25 years there. I think he was telling me before we got started. And so it gives him a deep understanding of how organizations perform, how they can improve the construction portfolios, and how they can empower their team truly to get more construction for their money. So you can see why we've invited him to be with us. And we're so glad that he has agreed. Clay, let's just kind of jump right into it. KPMG. I know it's one of the big four accounting and consultancy organizations. Tell us a little bit more about it, and in particular, your capital projects group.
Yeah, so, all the big four, as you can imagine, they have audit tax advisory groups. Our, what we call infrastructure capital projects kind of group, where our major projects group sits, is in, right now, it's in what we call the strategy group within KPMG. We've actually moved around to a couple different locations. And I think just like a lot of the big four, we're always trying to figure out what is the best way to position our team of professionals, whether it's by sector or whether it's by kind of solution and kind of expertise area. And we've always now, I think, kind of leveled on, we focus both on sector and solution. So everyone has kind of what we call kind of a major and then somewhat of a minor. And my focus has always been around capital projects and helping drive performance improvement for owners. Our group is kind of a replica of a lot of the individuals like myself, as you can imagine, people with engineering and construction backgrounds who like to get involved in major projects and major programs. So we're always looking for clients that have, either major challenges or they're scaling up to a level that they haven't previously kind of seen before.
Yeah, that's a lot of market right there. Help us know you better. Share with us your journey to KPMG.
Yeah, so I started my career as a project engineer for Bechtel. I was in Houston working on large energy and different types of kind of gas projects, worked on LNG projects. I did that for a brief period of time and decided that before I kind of committed to going overseas and making kind of longer term commitments to some of these large international projects, went back, got my MBA, and then subsequently went to work for Intel. And Intel was going through a huge expansion with large semiconductor plants, and I was focused on managing construction contracts for them. And then ultimately, I always was interested in doing advisory work, getting into consulting, had an opportunity to help start a practice at Anderson, was there until it went down, and then joined KPMG and was one of the individuals that helped kind of start our practice that I sit within right now. So it's been quite a ride. So it's been fun. And, I think along the way too, what I've been able to see is, a lot of the people that are in this industry aren't really competitors. We all see each other and we work together, even if we don't operate under the same banner.
That is so true. It's a fake industry. It's a relationship-based industry, as you well know by now, where nobody trusts anybody else much.
Yeah.
And so we've got some challenges to overcome there as we move ahead. But we're going to talk a little bit about that in our time today. So with your unique perspective and experienced eye, what's going on in the capital projects world today that the listeners need to be aware of? Maybe they need to be affirmed that they know these things. What are the big earthquakes that you see in our capital project space today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely an exciting time, and I don't think anyone out there, could say they haven't heard of AI. And as you can imagine, AI has manifested itself across lots of different sectors in different ways. But I think engineering construction is a sector that's been impacted probably more than many others, just because it's that intersection of huge demand for what kind of power growth that's coming from AI data centers, but at the same time you're also getting a lot of demand from other sectors too as well. That's just compounding that, from industrial manufacturers and even other types of kind of large kind of power consumers. And what we're seeing is that intersection of engineering construction with what we consider is like the power utility energy infrastructure kind of sector, along with a few other sectors where everyone who's touching upon that is trying to figure out how do they deal with this ramp up and this acceleration, which for a lot of energy companies, they're seeing the likes of 300, 400% increases in the size and scale of their capital programs. The size of these AI data centers has gone up from, 200 or 300 megawatts to we're seeing multiple, kind of terawatts. And you look at the engineering construction companies that are trying to serve this market, some of them, if you just look at some of their stock prices, never seen their stock prices go through the roof like we've seen recently. So there's a huge amount of demand. And I think what everyone needs to be a little bit more kind of concerned about is, are there going to be resources there to be able to service the demand? And then also the engineering construction companies and the owners that are out there, they're going to get their operational models really stress tested, because right now, if you look at it, a lot of their models aren't set up for this volume of increase, and they're not really structured in a way to be nimble, to be able to be fast and be able to accelerate these projects. So we're really seeing this huge demand put a ton of pressure that right now it looks like it's going to be really difficult for these sectors to be able to respond accordingly. And that's where a lot of our group comes in, where we're observing this and helping our clients firsthand, and it's a massive challenge.
I bet it is a massive challenge, and everybody understands that no one organization has the silver bullet to all of this. What are some of the unintended consequences of this kind of growth and demand? Number one, Clay. And number two, what sort of elements of their program do you evaluate most closely to show the most ROI or the greatest change, the better increase in effectiveness? Number one, unintended consequences of all this.
Yeah, I mean, first off, what you're seeing is a huge demand for these resources is putting a lot of what I would consider kind of cost pressure across a lot of organizations. I mean, even organizations such as ourselves, all of the like the talent, whether you're talking about talent that's out in the field, you're talking about people who are welders and pipe fitters, or you're talking about people who are more kind of project management professionals, project controls professionals. There's a huge demand for that talent, which is putting a lot more pressure in terms of companies and organizations to be able to pay the necessary kind of salaries that are going to be needed. And then what we're also seeing too, as well, is a lot of organizations, in lieu of having that level of talent, are trying to evaluate, are there other opportunities to use different delivery models or bring in different types of service providers, which oftentimes, as we know, when you start having you bring in other providers that may not have the skills and experience to deliver projects at the level that is needed, or to be able to deliver at the scale that's needed. That usually leads to other unintended issues around, project kind of change orders and project delays. And, typically that's when you also see a lot more quality issues come through as well.
Yeah, no doubt. So when you're coaching and counseling these organizations into out of 48 things they could be doing to drive improvement, here are the four or five that drive improvement most effectively. What are those areas? Where does a
Yeah.
company need to be examining their program right now?
Yeah. So if I was going to break it down, I think the first one is is going through a rationalization of their project delivery kind of operational model. Most organizations, whether you're an engineering construction company or an owner, are going to have some type of structured stage gate process. And what we've seen is a lot of these kind of operational models are legacy, they're older, they haven't been rationalized to figure out, can they be streamlined? can you leverage technology to automate workflows? Are there things that you can do to be able to have a much better insight in the trade-off of different risks that you may be taking on? If you want to be able to do something faster or with less resources, are typically a risk equation. So having
Yeah.
better tools to evaluate some of those trade-offs and some of those scenarios, that's one of the first things. I also kind of touched on it. I think from a technology standpoint, really being able to look on how you can leverage technology better to be more efficient, to drive productivity. I think a lot of organizations really kind of look at technology, especially in the kind of, engineering construction space, only around using like drones or building information management, but it can be used in the back office, it can be used in the front office, and we're also starting to see it used in the field. I think that's another one. And really, I think the last one is have to be much more selective about the projects that you do take on and make sure that the teams and organizations that are involved with planning which projects that our organization is going to take on, whether you're in an engineering construction company or an owner trying to prioritize projects, have to get much better at choosing those right projects. Because if you don't, you don't select the right portfolio, you may end up trying to accelerate a project that's not ready for acceleration, and you may be missing out on some other projects that could produce a high ROI that you can deliver right now.
Are there some elements of that evaluation that are unique to the owner community? Talk to us about the owner segment that you folks
Yeah.
work with. Of course, you work with an owner, Intel, and you also work with a service provider, Bechtel. Talk to us about some of the unique challenges that you're seeing emerge in the owner community, especially the industrial space.
Yeah. So, you know, kind of touching on some of the workforce challenges, as you can imagine, in the owner community, when you're faced with limited workforce and limited resources, oftentimes the project delivery methods that you've been using in the past that require a certain set amount of resources may not be available to you. If you're used to doing structured design bid build or doing much more kind of owner intensive type of delivery models, you may not have the resources for that. So what we're seeing owners look at is trying to figure out if there are different types of alternative contracting methods and partnering models that they can work with contractors that are going to give them still the ability to deliver these projects, but maybe with less resources. We're also seeing, typical kind of like from the oil and gas, we're seeing industrial manufacturers and others try to piggyback the kind of engineer, procure, construct delivery model, more of a turnkey model. We're starting to see that become much more universal, not just something you see in the oil and gas sector. You're seeing that come up in other sectors. I think some of the challenges they're going to have too is when you deliver, use different delivery methods, it takes different skills, tools, and resources to execute those effectively. And I think oftentimes people think just because you go with an engineer, like an EPC delivery model, you can wipe your hands clean, take a step back, everything's going to be great. And as we know, that's not the case. Just because you choose a different delivery method just means you need different techniques and tools to make sure they operate effectively.
Yeah, 100% on that. And that can be a very risky proposition. Back to technology, yeah, the implementation of technology. What do you see as the biggest barriers? Is it the process? Is it the people? Is it the differences between the field and the office? What are the barriers or the challenges, maybe a better choice of words, when it comes to effective implementation of emerging technologies or even existing ones?
Yeah. Well, I think I'd kind of look at it two ways. One is oftentimes how technology is approached is typically from a technology first standpoint, then a people and a process first. So sometimes projects just get started off on the wrong foot. But back into, when you think about how you're going to land the plane or adopt some of this technology, if you think about from the back office to the middle to out in the field, what we're seeing is that the change management and the adoption, it gets harder and harder the further away that you get from the back office. And one of the things that I think is quite fascinating too is all you need to do is go out in the field. If you're an owner and you're trying to think, well, why is it some of these contractors are remiss to adopt some of this technology? They'll go out in the field and they'll talk to the contractors and the people they have in the field. They're concerned about making sure that not only the work gets done and it's going to get done properly, but that people get staffed and they can get the amount of hours and that they need. And what they get concerned about is this technology going to mean I'm not going to get 50 hours a week on this
Uh,
project, or I'm not going to, is it, you mean we're not going to be able to staff you on the next project? So automatically I think they start getting really concerned of what this means to their livelihood. And if you don't address that from a change management really upfront and make sure that you have a thoughtful process, you're going to have people not wanting to adopt technology, and they're going to be behaving in ways that you may not understand until you circle back around and find out why they're behaving that way.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a minute. What if it does result in fewer hours on a project so they don't get overtime that they've been used to for 3 years? Or how do you counter that? Because the objective is more construction for the money, or improvement in budget, or improvement in quality, or less manpower, less personnel in the field personnel required. How do you approach those challenges? Because that's a human one right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily we're in a period right now where there is way more work than these construction contractors can deliver. So what
Truth.
this so the way I look at it is you have to be able to work with them and show them there's plenty of work. What this is going to mean is you're just going to do a larger portfolio of work because you're going to be
Yes.
more efficient. And then ideally show them how that's going to make the company more profitable, and then that in turn can help them. And I think that's one of the things I've seen just in general, a disconnect between engineering construction companies and owners is finding a way. Owners don't want engineering construction companies to go bankrupt. They want them to get a fair amount of profit. It's finding a way you can have a meeting in the middle where the engineering construction companies can do more, be more efficient, get more projects on time and on budget so they can deliver them more effectively. Owners are willing to pay for that. Right now, you're kind of in a mode sometimes of it's almost a worst case scenario. Projects aren't performing well. Owners, it's hard to budget and pay for projects that aren't performing well. And contractors don't want to invest in technology or things to make things better because the projects, they're not having the extra profit margins because things aren't working well. It's kind of like a never ending cycle that hopefully we can find a way to start breaking through that.
That's always intrigued me. You've got owners that say construction costs too much, productivity numbers are too low, and then you got contractors who say our margins are too thin, we don't make enough. So
Yeah.
somewhere in there, I guess, is truth, absolute truth, but it is a dilemma. Share with our audience some of the more creative approaches to solving those kinds of problems that you've seen. You don't have to name, obviously, companies unless they've given you permission, but what are some of the more creative approaches that KPMG has been involved with that, like, wow, that was a win-win-win case study on how to do this thing?
Yeah. I mean, and I've seen it in both, just from like what I would say, if, let's say you're embarking on doing some major transformation, you're implementing a large ERP system, which you would think may not affect, and this could be on the owner side, it could also be on the contractor side, because I've seen it where oftentimes the people involved in IT and finance don't think about operations, or the people over in the projects teams. Where I've seen it work really effectively is when you bring those teams into the fold, and you don't just bring PMs, you bring every single kind of role
Mm.
that's going to be represented on those, and you bring them into the fold, and you'll see individuals who work out in the field, or project managers, project controls people, or other people who are in operations who actually are, in the field workers, get very engaged because they're passionate about their work. And a lot of times they don't end up seeing what's going to the outcome of this technology until you're in that final stage of implementation. If you bring them on early, you get them really seeing what the overall vision is, they can help influence that in positive ways, and they can help bring the other team members that are on. And I think the organizations that are doing that more and more, and making sure that, like I said, they don't stop at just PMs, they look at all the different roles, we're seeing that work really effectively because those individuals become champions. And
Yes.
as you roll this out further, they start leveraging that in a way that I think they create even kind of super user groups that they can kind of continue to evolve and expand. And some of the best ideas come from those people who are the closest to where the work's actually happening.
100%. Talk about the people for a minute. The newbies, the new graduates, the 3 to 5 year, maybe 3 to 5 year experienced hire, or the new grads. What skill sets can they or do they bring that you think might be helpful to the more seasoned, experienced project team? Are you
Yeah.
seeing any dichotomy there between the more experienced team and the younger teams? And if so, how they work effectively, and where are the watchouts for those kind of demographic differences?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times what we've seen too, as you can imagine, is sometimes the most effective teams aren't typically the ones that are just have the most senior individuals. They have more of a cross section because oftentimes it's the people who have, 5, 10 years of experience who aren't so overconfident. But one of the things that we are seeing is some of that reverse mentoring, where you have the new people coming in who are actually doing some reverse mentoring. I've even had it myself where the amount of creativity some of the younger people have when it comes to technology and
Yeah.
figuring out how you can do things differently. And one of the things that I think is great is they've been already dealing with this in their high school and college lives, so they're getting much more comfortable with this being part of everything they do versus everyone else. What you're trying to figure out is what part of what I do can I start applying something to, when other people, if they apply it to everything they do, they're just used to that. They're used to like
Yeah.
anything I do, I can apply it to it. And I think some of that reverse mentoring has been quite helpful. And I think the more that organizations can start doing that, you're going to get people, I think more excited about, providing some of their experience back that's happened on projects, but also getting less concerned around technology because they're going to see that, hey, there is a lot of opportunity for them to embrace technology. They just need a forum and they need a way versus I think what doesn't work is just sending out blast emails or just saying we're going to track someone's usage because that doesn't
Yeah.
get someone in, it doesn't bridge the gap to be able to kind of leverage AI further.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Here's the other question that I think boggles my mind. I was talking to some AI folks over here at the University of Cincinnati, for example, and they're talking about, we used to keep an eye on change about every 6 months. Now it's every 30 days. So if I'm a decision maker and I'm getting blasted by ads and presentations at conferences and phone calls, and I see magazine ads or online ads, how do I begin to assess what's out there? What is the best way that a user, particularly an owner, can assess the utility of this myriad of existing and now emerging technologies? One claims to do it better than the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most of the organizations that we work with will do, and like they'll have two things. One is they'll do they have some type of assessment to see kind of where they're at in the maturity spectrum to get an idea also of an inventory of what technologies that you're using. A lot of organizations, even owners, it's much more prevalent with contractors, use a lot of different technologies to do the same thing. It just depends on what business unit you're in. If you're in a business unit in the Northeast or the Southeast, you might use different tools for your PMIS system or your estimating tools or your scheduling tools. So I think going through and doing that assessment and doing a rationalization to see if you can get some common standards around data and governance as you're thinking through how you're going to leverage technology. And I think the other is really setting like a roadmap to figure out, okay, well, you're not going to be able to change a lot of those technology immediately, but do you have a plan to sunset certain technologies or to start piloting different technologies that you're going to start leveraging? And that'll help you also if you want to get some common data governance and standards, like you want to have a standard cost breakdown structure and work breakdown structure. You need some type of roadmap and to plan out how you're going to get to where you want to be, to where you want to go. And I think that's where we're seeing organizations be much more effective because if you start with the fundamentals and try to get a lot of that right, you try to get a lot of your processes and your data governance right, does make implementing some of those more advanced technologies and leveraging AI much more effective. Because a lot of times, if you try to leverage AI and you haven't got the fundamentals right, there's a few people who can figure out, but it does create a lot of noise and confusion oftentimes because the AI is having a hard time using these large language models to make sense of data that is very disconnected and unstructured. You'd be amazed by how much it can take advantage of really structured data with strong processes. You can start creating agents and make things automated in a much simpler fashion.
Yeah, I think you may have just touched on my next question, which was exactly that. There's so many organizations that are generating enormous amounts of project data, yet the information doesn't seem to be evaluated and synthesized and then presented to the decision maker in a way that makes a difference. Is what you just said one of the answers to that dilemma? Or better stated, how can we begin to take this emerging vast volumes of data and turn it in, synthesize it into useful information to make better to see.
Yeah. I mean, what we're seeing a lot of organizations do is almost take two parallel paths. One path is trying to make sure that they have like some type of data lake or some type of data environment where they can leverage AI or other analytic tools to access all the data that they have going back, certain set periods of time so they can
Yeah.
start doing some analysis. And a lot of that is messy, unstructured data. And at the same time, going down that path of trying to standardize and get some data governance and structure in place and making sure they incorporate that into any new tools, any new ERP implementations, PMIS, so that they know going forward, they could still make use of that legacy data because it's still valuable in some sense, but they're going to be, it's going to be much more effective to utilize these tools when you get some of that data governance and those, standard taxonomies nailed down. And I think we're seeing that kind of parallel path taking place, not forgetting about the old data, but realizing it does have its limitations.
Yeah, that's for sure. This might be a nice place to stop and then tell our audience about a tool that we've developed over the last year using, of course, AI. We teamed up with the AI folks at the University of Synthesizing College of Business, London College of Business, 5 or 6 of those folks. So we've created something called the CURT Solutions Portal, which has taken every bit of knowledge that CURT has in its library, body of knowledge, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, a conference presentation, an article in the magazine, a white paper, a benchmarking survey, a blueprint for safety, for modularization, anything, panel discussions, almost 30,000 unique elements, and it is vaulted, it's containerized, it's traceable, it doesn't hallucinate, and you can ask it any question in multiple languages, and it will search out the relevant data that CURT might have on point and give you its source. So if it's a comment that was made in the panel discussion, it'll tell you who in that panel made that claim and what their contact information is. Our data indicates that nearly 70% of information that's consumed at conferences and meetings rarely gets used again. And if it does, it's hard to find. 9 hours, I think the data point we saw was 9 hours per week is spent researching information that the person already has access to, but doesn't know how to retrieve it properly. So the CURT Solutions portal, powered by Commodore, is our first generation solutions to that. It's free to all of our CURT members. And if you want to know more, if you'd like to see a demo about it from listeners, please just access curt.org, our website, call our office, email any of our personnel, and we'll be glad to set you up a demo to see if it makes sense for you. Again, it's complimentary to our first members, and we're excited about its use. It's got some great reviews since we debuted it just a couple of months ago, and now other organizations, including the American College of Construction Lawyers and a number of others, maybe I shouldn't be saying it, but are now very interested in using the Commodore platform and integrating the CURT body of knowledge with their own body of knowledge. So more on that later. Clay, what do you feel is the next generation of technology development? And I know your crystal ball is probably no better than anybody else's, but from your perspective, where do you see this going? I don't see us backing up on the AI highway at all. Seems like we're speeding in the fast lane going 90 and a 65. What about your perspective? Where do you see this going? What should we be on the lookout for if we are savvy owners and contractors?
Yeah. I think, where I see a lot of this going is within, and it could be within the existing tools, if you're using PMIS tools or you're using other types of estimating software, or it's within, kind of customized either dashboards or tools that have been set up. I think we're going to see a lot more very kind of advanced kind of scenario and predictive forecasting, and also kind of agentic kind of help with, as you can imagine if you're a project manager and you start your day and you had a dashboard that came up, and imagine if that dashboard allowed you to do some worst and best case scenarios on some of the risks that have come up, but it was prompted by AI. We're starting to work with different clients on that, but we're also seeing that in different applications. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more intelligence on what is happening on projects, where things are going, that's going to help drive some of those decisions to drive productivity in very quick, immediate kind of fashion. Versus right now, it takes quite a bit of effort and a lot of people who know what is going on. But as you can imagine, when that data starts becoming readily available from the field and it's organized and you have AI kind of on top of what you're doing, it's going to allow you to make decisions faster, and you're going to be able to do some really, I think, some really interesting scenario planning real time, which I don't, which, it's hard to do right now.
Yeah, that is so true. So that begs the question, where do I go to find out about these new developments? So what are some of your resources, your conferences, your trade journals, your websites? Where can I put my finger on the pulse of this new development and get good reading?
Yeah, I mean, AI is probably the one that is probably the most interesting, and some of the stuff that I've seen be the most advanced is all the different kind of AI kind of tools and engines out there, as well as any of the software platforms that are embedding AI. All have some, a lot of them have some really good. If you go on their sites, some really good information on use cases and case studies of that they've already been implementing, and I think that's where you're getting some of the best. Every single conference, though, that you attend, whether you're attending a construction super conference or you're attending an industry specific, like in energy, there's, EEI and there's other
Yeah.
types of kind of ones, they're all having a focus on kind of AI. But what I found is really having the access to some of the actual case studies and having them show some of the demos of some of the agentic tools has been really kind of helpful. You know, for our team, we're constantly sharing the various use cases from the work that we've done, and some of that is the most relevant too as well, because even some of the software companies that we work with, some of what has been put out there isn't some of the most interesting stuff that even's being done with that software. Sometimes there's a lag in that too as well. So it's amazing, like you said, how quick the cycle is right now. We're seeing, week to week, just so many different changes and what can be done.
What do you think is unique about engaging your organization to assess these myriad of challenges that those owners and contractors have? What is KPMG's approach to evaluation, recommendation, follow up? Talk to us a little bit about your approach and
Yeah.
why your team is effective, because it certainly has had a fantastic reputation. And I don't know, what is your annual revenue? Is 40 billion or something? It's pretty incredible. Or
Yeah. I
maybe
mean,
an old number.
yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things that KPMG and the other kind of big four, I think, have really done well and is stitching together what a lot of the services used to be delivered in silos, the audit, tax, and advisory services for quite a few decades. Well, now what we're seeing, especially with the advent of technology, is that there's a lot of kind of interconnections, not just between tax and advisory, but even our team over in audit that's using AI to do, more automated financial statement analysis. A lot of what they're doing and how they're applying that can be applied to other sets of data that they're doing. They're doing testing and, like remediation. So the way that we're typically approaching this is making sure that we're having that cross-functional team with individuals with those different expertise, but also with individuals, because we've hired quite a few that have backgrounds in leveraging and developing AI and different software solutions and technology and incorporate and embedding them within clients and owner organizations. And I think that's where we really haven't had that experience in the past. We have a lot more people with a lot more software and technology backgrounds to be able to incorporate on our teams. And they have a lot of different perspectives because, as you can imagine, a lot of times we're used to, if it's pretty good, maybe it'll work in a construction environment. But when it comes to software and technology and you're deploying it, it's got to be available. It's got to be safe. You can't have bugs in it. It's got to be able to work effectively, and you got to be able to test to make sure there's data quality, or you're not getting like hallucinations if you're using like AI
Right.
tool.
Yeah, that is so true. Hey, maybe there was a question you thought I would lob over the fence at you that I haven't asked yet. If you were ready and prepared, ready to go to fire it out, is there a question that you thought I would ask that I haven't that you'd like to comment on?
I don't know if it was a question, but I do think when we're talking about, like you said, where we think the industry is headed, I do
Right?
think a lot of the challenges that owners see in the engineering construction, which is it's very, all the companies are very fragmented, they're very siloed, they complain about low margins. I do think that now that a lot of them are actually seeing a lot of growth potential. Their stocks are increasing, and there's a lot more focus outside. I mean, from a lot of different investors in that industry. I think for the first time, we're going to start seeing some of those companies operate and act much more dynamically over the next 4 or 5 years than they ever have. So, I think if you're expecting engineering construction companies, are going to behave the same way in 4 or 5 years that they did, like they do right now and they have for the past, couple of decades, I may be like optimistic, but I do think we're going to start seeing some, because for the first time ever, we're seeing engineering construction companies invest a ton in technology and engage even advisors where, in the past they had low margins. They didn't want to do that. So I do
Right.
think the industry is going to be making hopefully some big leaps here in the next 4 or 5 years in terms of performance and being able to execute much more efficiently.
Wow. Well, let's hope so, because it's an exciting time to be alive. It's exciting to be in the industry. We've been talking to Clay Gilge with KPMG, one of the big four consulting firms, and his vast experience as an owner, as a contractor, as a consultant, and it's been absolutely fascinating. Clay, any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Hey, I just, I would just say, do not be afraid of technology. I mean, I'm not the best at it, but I think if you kind of go in with the right intent, I think, that it's better to, I think invest in pilot technology now, even if you're concerned, but you can do it in a measured manner and really get benefits. So I think anyone that's still on the fence, I definitely encourage them, because I don't know how you're going to get the performance multipliers that you need if you don't leverage technology.
Ooh, yeah, there's the golden nugget for the podcast. Without it, you're sunk. You're not going to do it. Yeah. We've been talking to Clay Gilge, again, senior partner at KPMG, about construction and the new developments in portfolio management, project management, and certainly the infusion of technology into our projects. Clay, thank you again. It's been a real joy. It's been so exciting, intriguing to chat with you. I appreciate your excitement, your enthusiasm about all this, and all the very best of luck to you. Thank you for taking time out to join us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
You guys have been listening to Construction Connections powered by CURT, and we'll catch you on our next episode. Thanks so much for joining us.